Going to pray for Jeanette as she brings our reading. I think you're bringing reading.
I'm bringing everything.
Bringing everything.
The reading's in the middle. So.
Father God, I thank you for Jeanette, and I thank you for the blessing that she is to us and to this community. I pray that you give her your words to say at this time. Just bless her and pray that we will receive your word that she delivers today. Amen.
Amen. Where's my clicker gone? Have you got the clicker? Can't get the staff.
I was going to put it on eBay.
I speak in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. When a janitor at NASA was asked what he was doing, his reply was, "I'm helping to put men on the moon." His response was a sign that every person working for NASA knew the reason why they were there and the purpose of NASA. Right? So just think about, what do you think is the purpose of COGS? Do you want to shout out what you think is the purpose of COGS? Grow God's kingdom. Show his love. Reach out to the community. Give each other support. Being a beacon of faith. Make disciples of all nations. Good answers. I'm aware that when I've spoken in the past about a vision for COGS, it's always been in the context of the APCM. So if you haven't been at the APCM, why haven't you been at the APCM? So, seriously, if you haven't been to the APCM, then you haven't heard the vision for COGS each year. So we want to change that. Every time the PCC and I meet, we have a time set aside just for the vision. So following every PCC from now on, within a month of us having a meeting, we will share with the whole congregation what is happening and what we're aiming for. Does that sound good? Yeah. Good. So this is what we discussed last month. We're going to start with a graph. Now, you probably won't all be able to see that, so there's a version of it on the thing. I'll bring it a bit forward. So if we were to plot the number of people, the average weekly attendance 3 years ago on Sunday services, how many do you think? I've got to put a scale on the side. We put 50, 100, 150, 200. How many do you think? What do you think our average was 3 years ago? 3 years ago? Because we're in lockdown. Well, we were still meeting online. 94. Should we go before 3 years ago, before COVID? So what pardon? 110. You reckon? Do people agree with that? 110? Okay. What do you reckon we are now? 52. I think it's a bit more than 52. Pardon? 90. Okay. So we've done that. What do you think? What would you like it to be in 3 years' time? 200. Well, I don't think I want 1,000. 200,000. Okay. So actually, we would like to grow, wouldn't we? Now, so actually, if we've got some actual figures, but averages are really difficult because of COVID. We don't know how many people watch online. It could be one person watching online. It could be a whole family of 6 watching online, but it only says 1. They could have watched for 5 minutes. We don't know. So we have no idea of how many people are actually joining us at the moment. So we can only go on figures in the building, which aren't very accurate because there are people watching online. Hello. So how accurate these figures are is anyone's guess. So this is the last 3 years. For Sunday services, which is the middle, the lighter blue, we've gone from, what were we on? 123. We had 123. We went down to, I can't remember what we went down to. We were about 100. And now we're now up at about 115. So we've gone slightly down from 3 years ago, well, before COVID. And the Messy Church has gone right down, and Midweek Communion has stayed the same all the way through. And if we look at our children's work, I thought the children's work was really growing, but actually it's not. It's slightly growing in the Zone. It's slightly growing in Junior Church, but the other, and it's growing. It is growing in Refuel. But look at the numbers. It's less than 5. So it appears that our attendant figures are going down. But our electoral roll figures are going up. But of course, it's not all about bums on seats, is it? If we plotted the number of people from the community that we have contact with, over the last 3 years, that curve would look something like this. Because we have a far greater connection than we did 3 years ago. The bus stop cafe and the bus stop break have greatly increased the number of people that we have contact with, and on a more regular basis as well. We've calculated that we know in excess of 5,000 people in this community. That's amazing. They either come to us or we go to them. That's an amazing number of people that we have contact with. But what we're not seeing is many people moving from one area of ministry into the church. They're not coming to know Jesus for themselves. We're doing some great work. I think you're all amazing. You work so hard. And we're meeting loads of need. But we're not just social workers. We are supposed to be evangelists. So as a church, I think we are brilliant at welcoming people. A recent visitor gave us 5 stars. But what we're not so good at is encouraging people to stay. If you remember back to 2020, summer 2020, when we were still in lockdown, we studied Nehemiah. We spoke about building back better, and that's what we've been doing. There is much more connectivity between all our ministries now, but there's still a lot more to be done. We have to work on extending our welcome to inviting people to be part of the family. So over the next year or so, we're going to be intentional about growth. We want to create a culture of growth. Now, what does that mean? It means rather than talking about buildings and money and the shortage of volunteers, we're always talking about the shortage of volunteers. We're going to be positive and expectant. So more about vision and growth. Being positive has to come down from the top, from the vicar down, the vision team down, the PCC down. But it also has to be something we all take on board together. Now, there's been quite a lot of research into what makes a church grow. The Church of England believes that growing churches have probably 8 things in common. They say, a growing church is likely to have a clear mission and purpose, and clergy and congregations who are intentional about growth. Secondly, they say that a growing church is likely to understand its context, actively engage with it and with those who might not currently go to church. A growing church is likely to be willing to self-reflect, change and adapt according to its context. A growing church is likely to have lay people as well as ordained clergy active in leadership and other roles. A growing church is likely to actively engage children and young people. A growing church is likely to be welcoming and build on ongoing relationships with people. And a growing church is likely to nurture disciples, encouraging people to explore and deepen their faith and live it out in their daily lives. And lastly, a growing church is likely to have leaders and lay leaders who innovate, envision, and motivate people. Now, I'm not saying that we don't have any of that. I think we have a lot of that. In fact, I think we have most of that. So it's not all bad news. We are doing the right things, but we can always do it better. And these things aren't formulae. There's no one way of growing a church, but we do need to be intentional. So we're going to change the DNA of Cogs. I've got to pronounce this now. I could do it at home. Deoxyribonucleic acid. Is that right? No. DNA, yeah, is the molecule that carries genetic information for the development and functioning of an organism. So it actually seems quite appropriate to apply it to growing a church. So let's go back to Nehemiah. If you remember, Nehemiah received the information that Jerusalem was in chaos, and he's really upset. Nehemiah 1 verse 4 says, "When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven." Nehemiah mourned and fasted over the state of Jerusalem. He was so upset about what was happening, it gave him the desire to do something about it. So he started by seeking God. I wonder, have we got that desire over the state of Crookhorn? There's a huge amount of need out there. There's a huge amount of loneliness, both sides of the road, especially since COVID. People are scared to come out, so they've become lonely. The cost of living has also had a huge impact. The need for food banks and other help is increasing. Both of these issues have had a huge, huge knock-on effect on people's mental health, which in turn has led to people becoming addicted to alcohol, drugs, gambling. They're seeking God in all the wrong places. Anything that will deaden the pain. We're trying to do something about it. We're running a recovery course. We're offering debt advice. We run the cafe, the bus stop break, and all the other groups. But do we really desire to give them the best thing that we know? Do we desire to give them Jesus as well? Do we have the desire to grow? So part of our new DNA is the desire to grow. But what else do we need? Back to Nehemiah. I forgot a slide. Nehemiah 2:4. The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it." Nehemiah prayed about the way forward with God until he had a plan. Rather than doing lots and lots of things, we need a clear plan. We will only see the vision and plan clearly if we get on our knees and seek God. So Nehemiah had his plan and he took it to the people. Nehemiah 2 17. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king has said to me. They replied, let us start rebuilding. So they began this good work. Nehemiah encouraged the people to take action. He shared his plan with the people on the ground so that they all bought into it. We need everybody in this church to buy into the vision for the future together. Nehemiah also shared the leadership, and that's what we intend to do. I don't have all the answers. We need to seek God together. As I was explaining last week, in order to ensure that we hear God and not our own wants and needs. A few months ago, this is how the church looked. There was the vicar feeding down to the PCC, to the congregation, sharing and hopefully listening, but it wasn't working very well. And I was feeling that I was carrying too much. And something needed to change before I collapsed in exhaustion. So this is what it looks like now. We've added a vision team as an extra tier. The vicar and the vision team are now meeting weekly to seek God. So the theory is that I work with the vision group, the PCC and the congregation to lead the church into growth. So it's not just me doing it, it's all of us doing it. We have to work together to shape and form the church's vision. So it's about sharing and more sharing and visions and plans as they develop. But it's also about listening, so it's all being fed back. It has to be dynamic, listening and sharing at the same time. Currently, the vision team is me, Phil, Warden, Jim, who leads the cafe, and Claire, the children's leader. It is open to change, and from time to time we will invite others along. It's not exclusive. But we're meeting every week for an hour. And in that hour, we worship together, we pray together, we seek God together. And so far, all we have done is worship and pray every week and listen. We are waiting on God for the way forward. If it works properly, the vision team should be feeding topics into the PCC for discussion. It's not going to be easy. Nehemiah encountered plenty of opposition and frustrations, and so will we. Nehemiah 6:16 says, when all our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations were afraid and lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. When obstacles arise and things try to distract us, we must respond as Nehemiah did by saying, no, I'm sticking to the vision that God has given us. Despite all attempts to undermine his work, despite the temptation to stoop to the level of his opponents and throw dirt, Nehemiah does what we should all do. He sticks to the truth and leans on God. Then right at the end of the story of Nehemiah, he's returned to Susa to work for the king. But he comes back to Jerusalem to see how things are going. And he has a bit of a shock. Nehemiah 13. Here I learned about the evil thing Eliashib had done in providing Tobiah a room in the courts of the house of God. I was greatly displeased and threw all Tobiah's household goods out of the room. I gave orders to purify the rooms, and then I put back into them the equipment of the house of God with the grain offerings and the incense. I also learned that the portions assigned to the Levites had not been given to them, and that all the Levites and musicians responsible for the service had gone back to their own fields. So I rebuked the officials and asked them, why is the house of God neglected? Then I called them together and stationed them at their posts. Negative influences had slipped into the life of the people of Jerusalem. We need to ensure that we protect the church from being diverted from our primary purpose, which is to worship Jesus and to lead others to him. Being together in that will become more and more important. knowing why we're doing it this way or that way helps us to stay strong, and it gives us a united front. And that speaks to people out there. I read something this morning, well, no, I listened to it, that said there was a minister who got on a bus, and when he sat down and he looked at his change and he thought, oh, I've been given too much change. So as he got off the bus, he said to the driver, you've given me too much change. And the driver said, yes, I know I have. And he said, well, why have you given me too much change? And he said, because I was in church on Sunday and I heard you preach and I wanted to know that you were worth listening to. So are we worth listening to? Are we living what we're saying? That's what we need to project out there. Now, changing our DNA is going to be an ongoing process. We will need to keep revisiting what we're doing and assessing what's working and what isn't. Our DNA is our culture, the way we think, the way we do things around here. I know that change isn't easy, but it is good. Without change, we die. John Henry Newman said, to live is to change, and to be perfect is to have changed often. We'd never grow up if we didn't change, would we? Without the desire to grow and change, the DNA of the church becomes nah, no, or not applicable. We need the desire to change or we die. Without the planning, becomes DA, delayed action. Things won't happen as they're supposed to happen. God's work won't be done if we don't plan properly. And without the action, we get a discrepancy notice. Sorry, it's a bit contrived, I know, I'm sorry. We're not doing what we're called to do. There's a discrepancy in who we are and what we're doing. So our DNA needs to be about growth. And that's exciting. Philip North, the Bishop of Blackburn, says, why do we need excuses? Church growth is not like homework. It's neither dull nor repetitive. Indeed, it's one of the most thrilling and exciting areas of ministry one can hope to be involved with. Imagine new Christians coming to faith through you. Imagine people growing in their love of Jesus because of what you have taught them. Imagine your local church flourishing and serving and bearing fruit. This is not a duty, this is a joy. And as we carry it out joyfully, so the world will be saved. So we're going to start believing for growth in numbers, spiritually, and in service to our community. We're going to pray expectantly, expectant that new people will join us each week. We're going to pray for God's vision and put aside our wants. We're going to show extravagant hospitality, inviting our friends and acquaintances who don't know Jesus to come for a coffee or a meal or to come to our small group. We're going to encourage one another in our discipleship. We're going to mentor one another. We're going to cry out for the lost in this community until they know Jesus. And if someone asks you what you are doing in the church, the answer is helping to grow the kingdom of God in Crookhorn. And we'd love you to get into small groups of about 4 to look at this and look at this summary slide and discuss together what you think we're good at, where there's some area that we can make better, and to think about what you can do to start changing the DNA in COGS. So if you could quickly get into groups of 4 and discuss what you think we're good at, what we're not so good at, what you can do.